Ah, yay. It's
Yeah.
December. Yay! It's December. I am still Raph, but the guest always changes. And today's guest, last of the year, Julia, by the way, a spot of honor. I just need you to know that. Is a Julia Fine, a great friend of mine, author of many books, most recently Honeymoon Stage, penned under this lovely pen name that we're going to talk about its origins in a second. But this I'm a big fan of your writing, Julia. I've enjoyed like you had three books before this, right? The
Yeah,
Upstairs
yeah,
House,
this is
Magdalene in
my
the Dark,
fourth.
and yes,
Mhm.
I read, was it When We Were Wild? Was your
What Should Be
first?
Wild was my
Excuse
first.
me,
Yeah,
I'm so
yeah.
sorry. Was your
No,
first?
there's a
What
lot of
Should Be
when we
Wild?
were books out there, so
And I'm
I
embarrassed to have
forgive
like
the.
thank you for the slight title botching. So there's a slight title botching, but there's in no way like that book, and it's kind of like speculative, all-encompassing, highly visceral, like the fairy tale world, right? But like a dark fairy tale world became for me the like signature Julia Fine reading experience. So when I went to your subsequent books, I was like, man, this is someone whom I can reliably go to for this kind of like enchanted but demented
I like
sort
that.
of this story of speculative femininity. I love your stuff and I'm glad you're on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry, and I know we already started
It's okay.
recording. I'm figuring out logistics. I think I just bought
You figuring out
more of a
logistics. It's
conversation
okay.
from
No worries.
romcom.
And Julia, for those of you watching later on, Julia might be a little bit distracted because she is doing the heroic work of momming even as we're talking. So I am going to like if there's like gaps, I'll fill the spaces. But
Perfect. All
as
right,
you're doing that,
I think I have someone to take my child.
oh bless Elliot. Okay, thank you, whoever's ferrying Elliot away from what should be cooking club, but is in fact not cooking
I
club.
know, I know.
Um,
Poor kid. Cooking club is over
poor little
for the
guy.
year.
I know. But yes, today, so I want to, as I mentioned, we're talking about honeymoon stage, which is actually no less a story of enchanted and deranged, demented femininity.
I I
Um,
feel like there's a lot in common thematically with everything else I've done.
with
It's just the
every
tone is a little
single,
bit
yes,
different. Yeah.
yes. Oh, absolutely. The tone, there's like it's like less baroque, right? Which of course it's going to be less
Mm-hmm.
baroque than, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, Madeleine, right?
Yes.
And it is not set in I don't know like post Enlightenment Europe. It's actually set in the aughts, a place we're familiar in a place that we're all familiar with, um, which is Calabasas,
Yes.
L.A. County. In the early era of reality TV, which we're all familiar with, I feel like I'm really kind of like chastising people who aren't implicitly. You gotta be.
Everybody
This is an
knows.
important time.
Hmm.
Everybody knows. Everybody knows
It was a monoculture at the
it
time
was
too,
a
so you couldn't escape
monoculture.
it. Yeah.
I couldn't. I know. I was like wearing like boxy little shirts and sad little LL Bean jeans. But you better believe I was like Tiger Beat. Like I knew what was going on with Britney. I knew what was going on with Britney Spears all the time. And so when this book comes out, I'm like, holy fuck, and then I did, and I loved it. And so and this is also, Julie, I must say, right? This, I think, what another great thing about this book is that it is like it does that cool like genre hybrid thing, right? Where it does hit those kind of familiar and I will say even like soothing beats of like a
Mhm.
romance, right? A romance thriller, but it's also got like um a whole lot of interiority, a whole lot of just kind of like twistiness and themes that I love of like surveillance and what reality TV really is and the story in real life and how do you produce real life and are we doing that when we're writing a book? Like yeah, it's like truly cool to think about. Um, so yeah, thank you for writing this, and I'm really excited to actually hear an excerpt from it. Would you
Yeah.
be down to read a little?
Sure. Yeah, I'm gonna read
Amazing.
from very close to the beginning.
Close to the
So
beginning.
the
Follow along, friends.
all the context you need is the narrator Cassidy has, she moved to Hollywood to go work in TV, and the only job that
Mhm.
she could get was through her aunt's friend. Um, Her aunt's friend's daughter is Maggie McKee, who is the star of this sort of new reality TV show. And so Cassidy, the narrator, is coming in. They've already started filming. They need to replace a production assistant. And so she is just getting caught up to speed. So I will begin. Maggie's team sent me the tapes in a package camouflaged as Civil War history, a label meant to deter anyone actually interested in watching two B-list celebrities navigate their first year of marriage. Celia went to work, and that afternoon I turned on the string out footage. I sat there in my sweatpants, one corner of my screen smudged with what must have been my thumbprint, our spider plant dying, our windows in need of a wash. And suddenly there was the sign that read Palisades Pines, the looming house, the white gazebo. Then came Maggie McKee in a custom wedding dress, feeding Jason Dean a slice of cake. Her long-sleeved, low-necked lace, her intricate updo, the tiniest trace of a girl I half remembered if I squinted. Jason looked suave in his tux, broad and handsome as he tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. He had a thick neck, chiseled cheekbones, and a strong chin, the kind of guy who would have had his looks to coast on even if he hadn't been a font of athletic talent. A close-up of Maggie's bouquet, a tight pink swirl of orchids and Juliet roses that probably cost more than my rent. A shot of Jason adjusting his a shot of Jason adjusting his jacket. Essentially, it wasn't all that different from the photo spread they'd sold to People magazine, a curated collection of moments I'd later realize was, like the show, going to help Maggie and Jason pay off this wedding. It was extravagant so that it could be sold, and they sold it so that they could afford the extravagance. Watching this intimate cut, I felt like a guest, or at least one of the cater waiters. There was Maggie staring into space, fiddling with a ribbon. She checked her teeth for lipstick with a finger, turned to a bridesmaid to confirm she was all right. She rested her arm lightly atop her father's. Jason pressed his lips together when he saw her walk through the door. Then they were sitting on a couch in jeans and t-shirts, surrounded by half-emptied moving boxes. Maggie looked very young and thin, and almost orange from her tan, which was something I thought they might want to fix in post-production. She had those big brown doe eyes and a nose so pert and straight she might have been a cartoon princess. Big boobs, supposedly natural. Jason gave her a little kiss on the top of the head, and she giggled. It wasn't exactly compelling television. I thought it unlikely that this would be my big break. The production assistant before me had supposedly buckled under the demands of the role. She had a fiance and hobbies and a real life she didn't want to miss out on. This would not be a problem for me, an ambitious young woman with no significant other, few local friends, and no money for leisure. The line producer had described the job as like being on location for a nature documentary, sitting silently in the Sahara, watching for movement, occasionally running off to print out MapQuest directions, repositioning a sofa, refilling a bowl of chips, getting Dan, the director, a ginger ale. Hours of nothing interesting, punctuated by high drama. Unfortunately, I would not get to watch two lions fighting for dominance, or a gazelle taking its first steps, or the sun rising over the Sahara. I would watch semi-famous people in their acts of daily living. I would watch the male of the species unkink the hose, while the female flipped through catalogs. I would watch them take phone calls, nodding along, jotting something on the pad by the receiver. I would watch them walk through airports and office suites and hotels and their living room. Watching them on the couch that day, I feared there was no way the show would last beyond this season, after which I'd have to find a different gig. And then I got to a scene on that tape with Maggie trying and failing to close a kitchen drawer. It was clearly off its track, but instead of reaching back and popping it in place, Maggie just repeatedly slammed it. Little sighs of exasperation floofing her bangs as she blinked mournfully, wondering what could be wrong. Gosh darn it. In that moment, I saw it. I understood. Maggie McKee was not just another teenage pop star. She was Lucy Ricardo meets Marilyn Monroe. She was unknowingly watering a plastic houseplant. She walked head-on into a glass door. And then there'd come Jason to crouch down to where she'd collapsed on the kitchen floor in clueless frustration, to kiss her on the top of the head and roll his eyes and call her ridiculous as he slid the drawer back in its slot. Oh, I said aloud. This kind of TV wasn't printing off a three-act script and having somebody read through it. This kind of TV was looking at a person's life and deciding what it would mean. Reality producers weren't just running the pre-written play. They got to change the rule of the game. Nothing could happen that they didn't decide had happened, even to celebrities like Jason Dean and Maggie McKee. They had the final cut. This was exactly what I hadn't known I wanted. The power to tell the story, to decide how it would end, to be the puppeteer ensuring that everyone stayed who and where they were supposed to be. I was addicted from that very first drawer slam. With Honeymoon Stage, we were going to watch Maggie McKee make a fool of herself and then smile endearingly as her husband cleaned up her mess. Maggie was the stereotypical TV housewife, despite her inability to cook or clean or iron, despite the fact that she'd worked all through her childhood and opened for Take Five at Madison Square Garden. She was in need of a man to shake his head and say, "Oh, Maggie," every time she did something dumb, while viewers sat at home and laughed. She might not be the best singer or the best dancer, but she was pretty and blonde and not very bright, and people were going to want to watch her.
Oh man. Mm-mm-mm. Thank you so much, Julia. It's like as you were reading that, I think the line that I remember the most from that when I first read it that was like leapt out at me was like reality TV is looking at a person's and deciding like what it means. Like what it
Hmm.
reminds me of what must have happened when Ryan Seacrest went to that Kardashian family function and thought, this is what this means.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
this is what like I am the architect of this family's narrative, and Chris is also the co-architect,
Oh, Chris, I
and
mean,
because she
she's
was
the
pitching
queen.
it. Oh
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, Momager
I
qua
just,
Momager.
yeah, when I think about that too, I imagine like looking at your circumstances and deciding, like, all right, we're just going to repackage this into something that will make us money and sort of, I don't know, there's something very both inspiring and sad about it, I think.
I think yeah, yes, absolutely. I think inspiring and sad. That's like the exact right combination of words, and like because we find out later on in your book, right, that of course Maggie McKee isn't just like
An idiot, yeah.
Jitsu,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
obviously, right? Like she is absolutely playing a character. And I think I really love the way her ambitions and her machinations are revealed. It's like so interesting and cool. But I think it's also, like as someone who has, for better or worse, watched both the earliest seasons of the Kardashians and the later season, and like kind of
Uh-huh,
compared them,
uh-huh.
I find them fascinating. I find them like, sorry for saying this, everybody, but I find them like Hasidic women in a way. We could talk about that in
Hmm.
a later. Well, that's a huge conversation
Yeah.
that I'm happy to
Uh-huh,
have at a
uh-huh.
later date. But like the it's interesting how like that was interesting TV to me, and it's interesting how there are narratives that are produced, but there is also source material,
Hmm.
and it's
Yeah.
like yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just like Kylie starts away, and then Kylie becomes the way that she starts, and who chicken and the egg is what I mean. So I'm so
Hmm.
curious, actually, before
Hmm.
we even dive into the official questions, like your thoughts on just reality TV in general, because I know you have tons.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy watching reality TV. I like almost all of it. There's like, a select like few that I'm not as into, but like I will watch basically any of it just because I'm so fascinated by what you can't see behind the screen and the way that we've all sort of agreed to pretend like there is no script when, especially now, 20 years in, 25 years in, like this is just as scripted as scripted television. It's just not as, word by word. But I think I'm fascinated by like what are the machinations? Like what did a producer do in order to get somebody to respond this way? Like particularly on the ones that are less like celeb reality and more like real people. They're real people, but like everyday people who don't necessarily have the media training or like the soft skills to manage being on television. I just like it's like watching a car crash in terms of like, okay, what did somebody say to get this girl to like start sobbing about whatever it is, or to, come out with these clips when they know, like at this point, we know, if you say certain things to a producer, they will cut it in a certain way. Like we all have this knowledge. It's been around the dating shows especially have been around forever and yet people still say the things people still sort of present this side of themselves and so I'm fascinated by that and I think that when we talk about the Kardashians or like newlyweds which this book is very obviously sort of inspired by Those are interesting to me too, because those feel like they're a combination of sort of the old celebrity publicity machine, and sort of like early social media plus reality TV. And so it sort of feels like there's two different categories, the sort of pre-social media, like Kardashian image making and like Renaissance self-fashioning of deciding like I am going to be this person and I'm going to present myself like this. And then lo and behold, 20 years later, they are now what they were pretending to be in 2005 or whatever it was. It's really amazing. And so like we said, there's a way in which you're like, wow, this is awesome, good for you. And then there's also a way in which it just reflects really poorly on American culture in general.
Well, yeah, it is the most, I think, cut and dry evidence of success of the American experiment, right? And that you could
Hmm.
fashion yourself in any form. Like you
Hmm.
could
Hmm.
just say it and then make it happen. To be fair, to be completely fair, Julia, I think that like a lot of us outside of the sort of like panoptic and highly controlled spaces that we're about to talk about in more depth, as they relate to your book, but just like people in our lives, I think some of us could benefit from like more of that, right? Where it's just sort of like
Hmm. Hmm.
instead of like, well, we were just talking about this before I started recording, but like, well, oh, I could internalize this belief about a certain book because of these sales numbers that, a certain book I wrote, or I could internalize this belief about, something else I created or something else I said because other people have reacted negatively, let's say, as opposed to saying, you know what? This is the shit. Like, and I feel proud of this. And in fact, I'm
Hmm.
going to say that this is a classic, whatever, whatever, right? And like, I think we underestimate the power of that kind of self-equatement, right?
It's The Secret, right? That book where you say it and it becomes.
You
Yeah,
say it
I
and
think.
then, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
It's especially interesting to think about it in that context too, of like the decision to be a Kardashian or be sort of a celebrity and
Mhm.
create this role, and then the way that like tabloid culture and like today, I guess it's like TikTok and Twitter and whatever else, like the pushback there of like you're declaring yourself to be this, and yet the response that the public gives has so much to do with like whether or not you can continue, or I guess I don't know, as someone, I've never been a
Oh
big
no,
enough celebrity to know, if like Ariana Grande cares what people are saying about her on TikTok. But it is like
that's a whole
the
topic,
back
right?
and forth
Yeah.
of it. I know. The back and forth of it is so interesting to me because on the one hand there is the sort of like declare it and it becomes Kris Kardashian type thing, and then on the other there's like, somebody can tear you down for whatever it is. And if it spirals enough, sort of in whatever tabloid and today's social media culture, like it can tear you down. So it's such a weird balance.
Oh, totally. And like that ecosystem, right? I mean, I'm honest, I'm glad you brought up Ariana Grande. I've been thinking a lot about her recently too. And it's just the the I think that there is a pragmatic approach that a lot of people take. Like you brought up the producer side of things, right? Where it's like,
Hmm.
listen, if I've got media training and I've been in the game forever and I'm Kendall Jenner, right? And I can go up to XYZ producer and I need to promote like this new line of products or do this or do that. I can actually just say the thing that makes the thing happen. I could just say the thing to the
Yes.
paparazzo that makes the thing, and that's all great and good. But if we're going to like, you brought up the non-celeb reality shows.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I, well, I feel like if we're looking at TLC and we're looking at something like, say, the Stanford Prison Experiment, right? We're looking at, in fact, like sociological experiments that supposedly had permission from the International Review Board for like human subject experiments.
Hmm.
TLC doesn't, they don't, but they're running a lot of experiments on
They
people.
really are.
Zero media training, and it's a knuckle
It's
biter,
such a
and
difference.
it's such a difference. And
Hmm.
there's a whole nother we could talk about. For instance, I Am Jazz. I think is an excellent example of that, of someone who didn't have that and then she has acquired, but she acquired media savvy to some degree, but she's young, and that outcome for her, right? Yeah, that outcome for her is looks different than Kendall, Kylie,
Hmm.
Chloe,
Hmm. Yeah.
Courtney, Kim. Um, and so, it's interesting to kind of talk about how these effects hit different. And in fact, actually, it ties into your book so directly, right? Because we have Cassidy Baum, the narrator, the Nick Carraway, as it were, who's kind of like, she went to
Mhm.
third grade with
That
Maggie
is,
McKee.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that was a very deliberate
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
comparison.
I was like, Jake Gatsby. Yeah, it was excellent. I thought it was spot on. And so she's the Caraway, right? And she's also, she has that relationship I think a lot of us had, and I'm really talking right now about young women in the aughts,
Mhm.
from with all different walks of experience, yet we still are like, pop divas really mean a lot to me. Um, and you and I, right? Like we have many things in common and many things not in common and whatever, but like I think we both would be like, Britney Spears really means a lot to me,
Yes,
and like,
absolutely.
yeah, Lady Gaga means a lot to me. And so I think that, Cassidy's in that kind of orbit in the early reality, right, pre-social media, but really has a concept of celebrity that frankly was more sophisticated than my own because I didn't understand the intense surveillance and the massive sacrifice that that level of scrutiny, fame means scrutiny. What does that
Mhm.
cost a person? What is the
Mhm.
pound of flesh taking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and so she's in Maggie's orbit, but at the same time, right, even as she knows, right, gosh, this is kind of, I can witness some of the cost here. She also witnesses Maggie go from B-list to A. She sees the blow up. And
Mhm.
it's so interesting the way you write this, Julia, because I'm thinking about that line where Cassidy is reflecting on how she has not had that experience of scrutiny. She has not had her waistline picked apart in the Daily right? Um, and she's seeing the trades that Maggie McKee's making. And like you're writing these characters in 2002 and then later in 2007. Here we are in 2025, right? Where like, you know, girls who are like 13 years old are like, oh my God, I'm going to go to the cosmetic surgeon and make a face tune into the real face, right? And like
Mhm.
can be picked apart, can get 40,000 followers doing that and then be picked apart by all of them. Create your own Daily Mirror, right? Be your own sort of
Mhm.
reality show. And I'm so interested in like, you've witnessed all of this. You've been in the metal, right? And you've written this book. What is it like? How does that era shift register for you? And was it in your mind as you were going back to the aughts to write this?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's such a direct line from reality TV to like social media influencer, in a way that I mean, I would hope it's hard to know because I feel very lucky that, I didn't have social media till college. I did not have, there just
Mhm.
was no, like, I can't even imagine how, I mean, I had live journal, but like we weren't sharing pictures of ourselves.
No,
So
right, right, of
I
course
just
not.
can't even imagine what that would have done to my self-esteem and my ego and just like, and I'm hopeful that, my kids are young enough that hopefully by the time they're adolescents, who knows? It'll be so oversaturated that people will have come back around. But I do
Yeah.
feel, I feel like it's the same cycle repeating over and over. And one thing I notice about it too is I think that in um, the early aughts, especially for people who are maybe slightly older than me, because Cassidy actually is slightly older than I was at that
Mhm,
time. Like she's in college when I was in high school, um,
mhm.
or out of college, even when I was like, whatever. She's like, a few 5 or 6 years older. And I think
Elder
that
millennial.
the elder millennial, whereas I feel very like solid millennial. But the idea that you could take these characters or these roles. And this is what I think Jessica Simpson is so
Mhm.
interesting to me about the idea of like, okay, you can inhabit this role, and can you then, are you the one in charge if they've like, drawn out this role? Or the Spice Girls is a great example. So in my research, I learned that the reason that the Spice Girls have the names like posh, scary, sporty is because the media, they were like, well, the media is already going to turn us into like, they're going to sort of assign us a character. So we might as well embrace it and like reclaim it and make it our own. Um, And I find that
Mm.
really fascinating because on the one hand, like, yes, if they're going to do it anyway, I guess it's better to do it yourself. And on the other too, there's this sense of like false sense of power, I think, because like just because you are preemptively stepping into the role that they're going to cast you in doesn't mean you're not still in this box that you're put in by the media and by pop culture and by consumers. So it's like, is there Maggie's dilemma in this book too? Is okay, so she sees what's ahead. She knows like I can either lean into this and try to harness some, power from it, or I could just let them do it to me without having any say in it. And I think that we get trapped in this idea that, like, because we quote unquote made a choice or chose a role, we're in control of something, when just the fact that there are these roles to begin with mean that we are not in control. And so I'm very, very interested in that. And I feel like that's something, I mean, that's across just like all my work, like even my book that takes place like in 1717. I feel like a lot of it is about that, of like, can you opt out of the system? Can you lean into the system and sort of reclaim something by doing that? And like the answer that I always come to is like, no, it's you can't, like there is no way to both play it and sort of critique it at the same time. Like you either are in it and you realize that you're in it and it sucks, or you're outside of it and you're an outsider and that sucks too. So really an optimistic worldview.
Oh, I mean, I think though there's like, I mean, it's actually a worldview I share, and maybe it is a mischaracterization to say that I think it's actually optimistic,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
I'm gonna stick with it because it is I think it's optimistic and that it's anti-patriarchal. I do.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I was,
absolutely.
yeah, and I was talking with a friend about this and talking about Olivia Nuzzi actually, and I was like, it was never going to be the case, right, that any of us would just get thin enough and strive hard enough, right? That the kind of, the patriarchal powers that be would be
Yeah.
like, you did it. Here are
Hmm.
the reins.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
there's not a way, like, as long as that is your North Star, right? There's
Hmm.
as long as like it's like I need to achieve this, or I need to like opt out of the kind of like this hyper patriarchal box. Um, and my whole existence will be defined by that opting out, right? Which I have done. And it's like you're still kind of looking back over your shoulder, right? At the promised
Yeah.
land that you've
Yeah.
been exiled from. And I think that like as long as we continue to call it promised land, and instead of saying like, maybe that wasn't all it was cracked up to be, right? Like
Hmm.
maybe this
Hmm.
wasn't, and that's why I think, Gabe is a pretty compelling presence in
Yeah.
this book too, right? Because the show that he and Maggie McKee grew up on, which is definitely not the Mickey Mouse Club in
Definitely not
any
Mickey Mouse
way.
Club.
No,
Nope.
no, really different.
Certainly not.
Yes, not at all. Um, but like, this kind of like young star maker show, right? Again, we're thinking of Britney Spears or thinking of Ryan Gosling, right?
Hmm.
Um, but he comes across as someone who's opted out, right? And who is kind of forging his own path, but still with that sheen of celebrity, at least when Cassidy first meets him. Granted, the gender thing maybe is not as salient for him as
Think it
what we're talking
helps.
about here.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
helps, totally. Um, excuse me, but there's still that like image, right? There's that promise at least of a life that is not defined like by the cone of fame, like fame or no fame, like system
Hmm.
or no system. And so, that's what I think that takes me to my next question, right? Where it's like you wrote this book is like a romance, it's like a real romance within kind of a produced romance, but
Hmm.
like a Russian nesting doll of romances. It's really interesting. And I'm like, if like I'm really really curious on your take about like opting into or out of the system as it applies to genre,
Yeah.
right? Like
Hmm.
we're thinking
Hmm.
about this even as writers, we're thinking about this as like people who are producing non-live characters, but let's be real. Um, how do you feel about like that kind of, I don't know, that kind of hybridism, right? Like you wrote a book that could have just been like steamy, yeah, just sort of pure genre, but it is
Mhm.
still it's Julia Fine. It's like it's psychological realism, it's interiority, it's like the insecurities and the thrills and everything. And so I'm really interested in your thoughts on that. Like
Mhm.
I appreciate how you pulled it off.
Thank you. I appreciate you. At a certain point, I think much as I tell myself like, oh, I could just pop out, a TikTok romance, what do they call it? Spicy romance, blah blah. Like, I don't think I'm capable of that. And I don't know that it's like, oh, I just physically couldn't do it. Like I don't have the chops to do it. Probably if someone was like, this is your only source of income, I could do it, but I'm not interested in that kind of work. And the things that I like about writing, I don't get to do if I'm writing something that is so sort of paint by numbers genre, which there are some people who like, I'm sure it must be so much fun if you are someone who writes spicy romance to just get to do that all day, if that's what sort of scratches your itch. No pun intended. But for me, the things that are interesting to me about writing is that are like the psychological exploration and sort of the way that like setting and place interplays with the characters. And I think that while you can do that sometimes in like sort of a strictly genre book, like I like to have the option of whatever the book needs, which often means combining genres or like making weird choices that don't make sense to everybody. Like The Upstairs House, my second book, has like excerpts of a dissertation in it. And like some people love that, and other people are like, this is so boring. Why did you do this? But for me, like I just like being able to take what I think the book needs in order to be the project that I want it to be. And in that sense, like I feel very good about like Honeymoon Stage as a piece of art and less as sort of like a commercial product. Because I feel like, yes, it leans more commercial than my other work. And is not, if you pick it up expecting to get something like a Julia Fine book, you might be surprised, hence the pen name. But at the same time, I feel like it's very much like, oh, the reason that it sort of reads more commercial and the reason that I made these particular choices is because this project needed something more commercial, not because like market forces or success. Like, I mean, I think we all want, like, obviously it would be nice to feel very secure in publishing. Although I don't know that anybody ever gets there. Like even the people I know who have massive success, a lot of them still feel sort of insecure about the next thing. So it's sort of like, well, whatever. But aside from that sort of security, I don't know that there's much value in some of the things that we as writers have decided are markers of success. Like I think like it's great to get good reviews and have people engage with your work, but like does being on lists really matter? Like do sales matter outside of that? Do I get to do the next thing? Um and I'm saying this as someone who has had very mixed sales. Like some of my books have sold pretty well, some have really not sold very well at all. But I think like the using that as like a barometer of like how to make the artistic choices is just a recipe for a book that's not very good, even if it sells well. And so that is sort of how I ended up where I ended up with Honeymoon Stage.
I'm thank you for that. And I'm really excited to get more into the like the writers, the insecurities, the books in the real world, the success or the chasing of it. But I want to before we get to that, I kind of want to like I want to draw the distinction, right? The like between that sort of we'll call it the material world, I guess, and then
Mhm.
the like why we do it. Or like
Mhm. Mhm.
why is this something that people are so compelled to do? I had a writer who came on this show, an author who described her compulsion to write as the thing that is gonna happen for her, or else her brain will shred itself like a rat in a trap. And I was like, that
That
is
sounds
true.
right.
Whew. It's an accurate way of putting it, and it's like that one like I feel seen in a horrible way moment. I'm tagged in this photo and I don't like it. There we go. Um, but I'm so yes, there's that, right? But I want to even for you get kind of into the specifics of it as well. Like across all of your books, including Honeymoon Stage, right? there is that, the kind of like enchantment derangement, which I guess Zoom likes, well, the enchantment derangement
Agree.
dichotomy.
Mhm.
Agree. Um, and like, the just like how strange it is to be a woman, I think is kind of part of it. That's why I've
Mhm.
responded to your work so intensely, I think. And I'm really, really interested in when you talk about like you're living for the interiority, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of like getting to make
Mhm.
sense of what's going on for these characters. What like how does that and like or excuse me, how does that interest tie in with these themes of like womanhood, or like womanhood across a vast array of experiences for you?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a big question. Part of it is wanting to like I don't know that I believe like, oh, you can only write what you know and you can only write inside your specific identity group. Like that's not true. But at the same
No.
time, I do think that my lived experiences and the things that I myself personally have been through refracted are more feel like a truer book than
Hmm.
something that is totally foreign to me. And so like I could go and live, do like an anthropological study of whatever I'm doing or do, field interviews or do like, and I think that there is a world in which probably I will get there if I'm lucky enough to keep doing this because my own life, is just not interesting enough. But for what I've done so far, a lot of it has been like experiences that I have had and how do I sort of refract this through fiction in whatever way that it is.
Hmm.
And I feel like if it's not something that I am moved by and can deeply feel, it's not going to come out as something somebody else wants to read. And a
Hmm.
lot of the things that have been moved by and deeply felt in my life, I guess, have been related to um, not even gender roles so much as like social expectations of gender roles and sort of boxes that people get put in general. And again, it's funny because I find men a lot harder to write. And again, I think it's because like my lived experience is easier for me to write, which again, I think people can write outside of themselves in really wonderful, beautiful ways. And maybe if I didn't have children, I'd have more time to really explore that. We'll see as they get older. Um, but yeah, I'm just saying for my own personal, like when I think about insight that I can provide that I think nobody else is providing, or like a take on something that I can have that feels unique and interesting enough to, you know, have somebody invest however much time it takes to read a novel. Like I often come back to like experiences and things I've been thinking about since I was very small.
Hmm.
And like I'm, the oldest daughter of three with two younger brothers. I live in the same sort of society that we all do. And I think growing up in the early aughts was an especially interesting time to like be a girl. And to
Yes.
look at, there were so many sort of hypocrisies that you could like put your finger on in a way that 100 years earlier you might know sort of fundamentally this was unfair, but now you can look at people saying it's unfair and see it happening anyway. And
Yes.
so I think that to
That's
me,
exactly.
like that's made a
Yeah.
really big impact on just like the way that I view the world and the way I view society. And it's funny because I think when I think about like my political life, which I'm not, I don't meaning like things that I try to do for my community or ways that
Hmm.
I, like organizations that I give to, like I
Hmm.
don't think that those things necessarily fall into a like I'm more concerned with like feminist organizations or,
Sure.
that I don't think it doesn't fall that way. Like sort of my like
Right.
interests when it comes to how they tell you like, okay, pick a lane and then like do your focus,
Yeah.
your frustration with the government
I
on
hate when they
one
tell
issue.
me that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
not
So
gonna. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I hear you
But
there.
anyway,
Yeah.
like it doesn't end up there, but I feel like it is just
Right.
something that I think about a lot and something that I feel like I am my thoughts on like gender issues, I guess, or at least on sort of
Mm-hmm.
like social structures and the way that men and women are treated are, I don't know. I mean, as I say this, I'm working on a project that really I mean, I'm sure that somebody will be like, this is feminist horror because everything that I write gets like, but it feels less. less intense. But when I think about
Sure.
my first book is about sort of coming of age as an adolescent girl. The second one is about becoming a mother.
Hmm.
The third one is sort of about, it also is about sort of girlhood and sexuality and
Hmm.
desire. And then this one is about pop stars. So it all sort of categorizes it. I
Which
don't know if
is,
I've
oh
answered the
yeah,
question.
all of
I'm just
those.
sort of rambling.
No, 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 you absolutely did. And I think, I mean, what's really, yeah, you said so much that kind of like leapt out at me, but I think, what really feels, gosh, what really feels most salient is this idea, right, of like living as you know, or living as you know, writing what you know,
Mhm.
less as like a dictum, right? I think when it starts to become a slogan or a dictum that you have
Yeah.
to adhere to or else, right?
I
Then
think
we
about
can
any
kind of
writing advice, you can throw it away as soon as it becomes a dictum. Yeah.
please do. Um, because I think that like there, you prod a little bit deeper, then you could see that like inevitably maybe overbearing thesis advisor, right? Or the silent hand of the market, right? You could kind of
Hmm.
start to feel people's fear maybe lighting up around that. And I think that um, I had like a different experience from the one you're describing in that um I was naturally um I felt deeply about things outside my experience. I think in an attempt to flee my experience. Who knows why?
Interesting.
Right,
Uh-huh.
yeah, because we're all kind of like, my experience, this is feels intense. And some of us are like, let's go here. Some of us are like,
Hmm.
let's
Hmm.
analyze,
Hmm.
whatever. And I think that the project I'm working on right now, it's wild because it's like I've got this my first book, lots of different narrators, different walks of life. Second book, it's gay men, and that's not what I am. And then not to reduce it to identity, but kind of
Hmm. Hmm.
easily not categorized that way. And then you have the collection that is not that at all. I'm writing a book that is autofiction. It's autofiction. I'll be real. It is autofiction. Like it's like there's a character who's unmistakably
Clearly.
a stand-in for
Uh-huh.
myself. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think about this too, Julia, when like people are always like, "Oh, I'm not Sally. I'm not Sally in the book. I'm Sally Rooney." And it's like,
Hmm.
well,
Hmm.
I hear you, right? Not to put Sally Rooney over the hot Rick over the coals here, but like it's like there's a kind of a rush to make that distinction, which I think is fair, but I think there's also in the rush, maybe we miss talking about what of this book. I get it that you're not exactly this character, right? But what of this book speaks to your experience
Yeah.
deeply, heavily, intensely? What are you kind of puzzling through here? We decouple ourselves from our books, I think, also out of fear of reprisal, fear of whatever. But then we maybe lose sight of what's making us, what's moving us to write them.
Hmm. Hmm. I totally agree. And I also think I mean, I do not think you can have a well-written character that does not have something of the author in it. Like I don't think it's
Totally.
possible.
I
Like,
don't
and
think
you
it's
can write
possible.
like a terrible murdering bigot. Like Lolita is a
You
really good
can't.
example of that. Like obviously, okay, like Humber
Yes.
Hubbard is not Nabokov, but like there
No.
is something that he felt in himself, and he said, "I'm going to
Yes.
explore this through this character." And I think that every character is
Yes.
like that. And the thing isn't like pedophilia. Like it's not, I don't think we have to. There's not like a one-to-one correspondence in the way people like to say. I don't know. Like I feel like people like to just quantify things so simply and categorize them and say like, oh, if you're writing this character, you must have these repressed urges. It's like, no, like maybe there's something that you want that you can't
No,
have, or
Freud.
things that
Right.
like it just is a much more complicated,
Right.
nuanced thing. But I think
Yes.
that there's no, this idea that like, oh, this isn't me at all. Well, then it's not a good book. Like, I just think there's no, where's the
Right.
humanity? Like, I think that when I'm reading, what I am reading for is that like connection to another person, whether it's a character
Yes.
or the author. And
Yes.
I'm not going to get that from some. sort of I feel like with students too, and you're like, oh, this character feels really wooden, or this feels like a stand-in or a stock character. Even
Mm,
in my own work in a first draft, like the issue
hmm.
often is like, where am I in this character? Where is like our commonality and sort of
Oh,
our
I
that
love that.
speed of feeling, you know?
Yeah. No, well, totally. And then I think like it, oh man, it's like when someone says like, oh, I'm certainly not like X character, and I'm like, but your book is very good. And I'm not saying that you wrote a memoir.
Yeah.
I'm saying that
hmm
there's something of
hmm
you in this, right? And that's what I would say of this book I'm working on, right?
Yeah.
There's something of me in it, right? Of course, this
Yeah,
isn't
yeah.
like
And
memoir, you know.
the things that the character does are not things that you would do.
You
Like
did
it doesn't, the
exactly.
things that the character believes are not indicative of your beliefs, which there's like, the crazy brand of, I think, often younger readers who have decided that like if there's, any sort of anything in the book, if there's racism or homophobia or, whatever else it is, like the author must feel this way. And it's like, we're trying to talk
Wow.
about the world and this exists in the world. We have to be able to talk about it.
Exactly.
But it still can mean that you're in your book. Like we don't need to make these binaries and these crazy sort of like, it doesn't have to be a didactic thing. Like you can talk about, so like in Madalena, like a lot of it is about just like misogyny and homophobia in
Hmm.
1700s Venice. And I think the conclusion that some readers came to was like, this is a homophobic book. And it's like, well, I think the conclusion really is that like mainstream society in 1700s Venice was homophobic. It's not the book. It's, we're
Yeah, I
talking
don't think
about,
like
so
we're
it's
walking
just,
around
it's,
18th century Venice being like lesbianism. Love is
yeah.
love.
So
Love
it's
is
like, what
love.
do you want?
Like,
I think people want something out of their reading experience. Not all people, a certain type of reader wants something out of their reading experience that sort of makes them feel like every book they read is like a nice, cozy hug. That's not the kind of
right.
so
No,
not
no.
gonna
I mean,
happen.
and too, right? It's like the author, because of course you and I remember, right, coming up when we came up, like the death of the author. That's what you
Mhm,
really learn in these
mhm,
kind of formalized English and programs and creative writing
mhm,
programs.
mhm.
Um, and that's an ideal that has been formally extinguished since the 80s, right? And now the author's not only alive, but like self-canceling before the book is
Yep,
even published.
yep.
I'm thinking of course, Elizabeth Gilbert's Russia book or Ukraine book or whatever it was. But this all takes me back, Julia, to as a matter of fact, reality TV, the surveillance state, and like how, you know what I mean? Like how it would be so it feels so easy for you and I to be like, we're not like celebrities, obviously, right? We're not being surveilled in the same way that a Maggie McKee is, of
Mhm,
course. But like with I think what your book does so well and why I think it is I think growing up in the aughts made us kind of prescient, made us, you know, be able to see at 2025 like, oh my God, like we're coming back around the mountain. You know what I mean? Body positivity was like that. And now we've got Ozempic,
Got a
we've
good
got
five
Facetune,
seconds
we've
of
got,
it. Yeah.
well, that was
Mhm,
fun. But
mhm.
then we've got like, like anorexia is back, like with a vengeance. And why is this kind of distorted high control view of what it means to be a woman coming back in the same way
Mhm.
that it was really existed hardcore when you and I were growing up? And I think it's because of this like sort of flawed understanding of what it means to be a main character, right? You talk about, the like writers or the excuse me, the younger readers who are like, this writer cannot be racist or homophobic, right?
Mhm.
You can see in Goodreads these really real there are writers who respond, which I'll just hold my tongue about
I know
how I
we've
feel
all
about
wanted
that, but
to, you just don't.
uh, um but like yeah, it's like it's not just here's my art object, it's like here's me.
hmm
And we could take this, I'm thinking about this as I'm writing autofiction, right? Like we could take this a step further where people will write really kind of flattering autofiction or criticism, right? And that's
hmm
part of the anxiety of like, I'm not the main character, right? But honey, you are, and the main character is overly perfect, right? So again, this is my whole kind of realm
Yeah.
of stuff that I've been thinking about, but I'm really interested as you're writing this book, right? Are you thinking about, man, this is how some of this reality TV stuff and this marketing of the self applies to writers too, even. Like,
Oh
was that
yeah,
coming up for you? Yeah, say more about
absolutely.
that.
I mean, there is such a decision to, especially I feel like post COVID, which I mean, my first book and yours too came out like right before the pandemic, like 2 years, I
Oh
guess, but
God,
like
it
still,
did.
it felt like a very
Fun.
different climate. And I think part of that was like the media
Yeah.
environment was different and like in-person events, like, there just were more and different avenues, I feel like. And then with the
Hmm.
pandemic, like a lot of the shifts that the like publishers made and readers made and all of us made as a society just like changed the game a little bit. Why did I say that? Oh, but yeah, I think post like so there's so much about like here's how you should market yourself and you can be this character or that
Right.
character or like oh my gosh on TikTok, which I dabble in TikTok. It's too much for me. It takes me like 7 years to make one 20-second video, so it really is just not a good use of my time. But on TikTok I'll get like the advice of like, okay, what you have to do is find your lane and stay in it and only post about this kind of thing, and I'm
Uh,
just like not interested in that. Like if I'm interested in, you know, Twitter circa 2016, where I can just say whatever I'm thinking in the moment. And I don't have to
yeah.
really worry too much about it. And like probably somebody will misinterpret it, but like whatever. And it feels very much now like the way to even and writing under a pen name too. It feels like, okay, so who is
Mhm.
Margaux Eliot? What is she interested in? What does she like? And it's like, oh, she likes
Yeah.
2000s pop stars, like, and reality
Right.
television. And it just feels so antithetical again to like the kind of life I'm interested in living, where I can,
Mhm.
be interested in and converse on multiple things. I mean, I am interested in like there's a Great Gatsby quote and an Andy Cohen quote as the epigraphs for this book. Like I'm interested in both of those things. I want to,
Mhm.
like have a range of like I want to present myself as a fully formed person, but that
Yeah.
does not sell books, nor does it, create a pop star or a social media influencer. And so it's this interesting time in which I think like our understanding of success career-wise or online at least is so antithetical to like again like I said my understanding of like success as a human being living a well-rounded fulfilled life, and so there has to be
Yeah.
a decision
Yeah.
at some point of like
Yeah.
these are the things that matter to me, maybe I will try this. I really I'm not interested in marketing myself. Like
Mhm.
if it is fun for me to do a little video of my book, I guess if I can engage in something real, I'm interested in that. But like
Mhm.
marketing, it's so oversaturated anyway. It feels like such a long shot that something I personally would do would have the kind of impact on my career that would justify sort of the like soul selling that it would take of me. And so I've sort of, oop, I lost my headphone. I feel like
So
I've
here.
sort of put that to bed. Um, Even as every so often I'll be like pop in and try to hop on a trend, but like I don't know. I feel like there are things I would rather be doing. I don't know. How do you feel about the marketing? This is what your newsletter does so well though, is I feel like you're like, I can write about this, I can write about that. I'm just this is gonna be things that I am thinking about. And you
Yeah.
sort of have built up, I guess, a community around that, which I guess I admire.
Yeah. I have. I mean, you said, right, like there comes a time when we have to kind of choose between what does success mean, and is it a
Mhm.
well-rounded life, and is it this, and there's I was thinking too of the what you said earlier about security, right? And well, I'm excited to talk more about the pen name, the Margaux Eliot
Mhm.
thing with you as well. But I think maybe this could be a lead into that. Because I like hot take, controversial opinion, but I have it on not just good word, but like the word from people who are editors and who were editors, that there's not like it's not quite as simple as, oh, you wrote a book we all really believed in, but your sales numbers were shit. No more books for you.
Mhm,
That
mhm.
doesn't happen. So that's not how the
I
industry
am
works.
living proof of that actually because
Yes,
given my
I am
sales
too.
numbers, I should not have been given some of the opportunities I've
I
gotten.
am well, but that's the thing, Julia. I am too, and I think many people are. This problem is wildly common, and it's almost we can kind of think of it as less as a referendum on our ability to like develop an audience or appeal to readership or this or that, or like a highly distilled, highly commercialized concept of what it is we're doing, and more as a bad performance review,
Mhm,
which you know what those mean about a person's soul and their ambitions and their actual like the meaning of their life. Oh, it's nothing.
mhm,
It's absolutely nothing. And so I think that like having been in academia as well, right, and had an experience where um, I started to recognize, like, oh, like, here's where I feel good, right? Here's where I'm having like a cool, fun, exciting impact in the classroom and this and that with these fun collaborations with colleagues, who, were interested in like learning more and doing this or that. And here is where there's like top-down control happening, there's hierarchy happening, there's stay in your lane happening, there's scarcity happening. And so when I think about these themes, um, I also think about like, man, there are times in my life when I just feel so expansive and so excited to be doing what I'm doing. And there are
mhm,
times in my life when everything feels horribly overdetermined by this bullshit, right? And I feel
mhm.
like I'm making my head against the wall and I feel insane. And then I talk to a friend who's had multiple bestsellers and been a National Book Award finalist and is like, what really sucks is that like XYZ giant goalpost that I've ever, and I'm like, okay, this is
Every
crazy.
mhm,
How I,
mhm.
right, exactly. Just what you said earlier, right? Where it's like, oh man, everyone's doing
Nobody's
it.
satisfied. Nobody, so as
Nobody's
soon as you realize
satisfied.
that, it sort of is freeing, right?
It's sort of as freeing, right? And we can kind of compare it even to a Kardashian situation, right? Where
Mhm,
it's like,
mhm.
excuse me, I'm so sorry, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold a few days ago. But like it's like you don't just like get your nose done and get your boobs done and you're like, thanks. Whoa, I'm self-actualized.
Mhm,
No.
mhm.
You need to keep going back to your plastic surgeon. That is the
Yep.
goddamn point of it. That is the point of it, right? And so if I'm like, oh yes, algorithm gods, I stay in my lane. I just want 14,000 followers. It's like there is a bit of a Mephistophelian bargain, and in fact, you are always getting the short end of the stick if you're
Mhm.
getting any end of the stick at all.
And
And
there's
so,
no
like,
it then
yeah,
the
go
line
ahead.
too, like we were talking about celebrity and social media and scrutiny too. The line there is like, okay, so say you do cross over this imaginary sort of threshold. Well, then from the other side, you have like insane media scrutiny or, people trolling you on social media. Like there just is no
Mm-hmm.
good, there's no place that you get to. And I feel like this is just like a life philosophy thing that it's taken me, my entire life to get to, but like I feel pretty confident in it now is like there's no place that you get to where all of that is solved. And so much is about
No,
figuring out, like you said, like what is it that feels fulfilling to me and is invigorating and that I enjoy about this, and what do I not like, and how do you balance that of like, here's what I have to do in order to maintain, and here's what I can do that will really feel meaningful to me. And I think
yeah.
it's true in the literary world, and it's very easy to forget that when your encounters with other people who are working in publishing or in writing are about sales targets and numbers and rules and here's a way to get
Mm-hmm.
a this whatever. And I feel very lucky to have the majority of my relationships like in publishing and writing not be that way and be much more interesting and fulfilling to me.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Say I feel similarly with as regards to my relationships. And it's interesting, Julia, because I wrote an essay about Gilmore Girls, but Rory Gilmore specifically, and how like growing up in the odds. God, I can't relate to the Gilmores. I can't relate to that level of lost
Hmm, hmm.
family. Um, but my God, I can relate to Rory. A brittle shell of a person propped up by everyone else's approval. And we're not talking adulation, we're talking like Rory is personally responsible for everyone else being okay with Rory. Rory is going to spread herself thin so everyone else feels okay and they're okay with Rory. And that's the only reason Rory would be okay. She's a part of nothing greater than making sure the ship stays stable and Rory is like safe and okay. And I think a lot of I would describe it as an anti-feminist read of Rory that like, oh, what an egotist, what a narcissist, right?
Hmm.
There are ways in which Rory is selfish, sure, but this aughts millennial girl, which I was, who fetishizes celebrity, who thinks like, oh my God, the pop diva has it made and she did it right. She's perfectly skinny and perfectly straight. She did it. It's just an extraction of that same exact thing where it's like, oh my God, she's pleasing everyone. She can please everyone so much in that and she so when we get to the publishing world, right, where it's like, oh, a new set of rules. Let me please you. Let me
Yes.
please you. Let me just self-optimize in the right way so I please oh, I'm gonna please you. I'm sorry. Should I lose weight
Hmm.
about it? It's that same tendency or set of tendencies. I'm sorry, go on. I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt.
absolutely. I mean, I think when I think about my publishing experience too, I feel very lucky to have an agent who is firmly, um, firmly believes in whatever it is I am bringing her, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that I feel like I have that as like a stabilizing force where like, and there have been times where she's been like, this is a bad idea. You should not do that. And then I'm like, okay, this is probably a bad idea. But in general,
Mm-hmm.
to sort of have somebody in your corner who is like, yes, we can, like, this is your career. And if you want to jump from this to that, go for it. Don't worry about this set of rules. Here's the one rule that maybe we should follow, and I think having
Mm-hmm.
that is so useful. And I know so many people who've had, left their agents and found new ones or have not as strong, like just don't have that kind of relationship with an agent. And I think that it's so important. I don't know what the parallel would be for. I mean, maybe having like a really not dysfunctional, a really functional like nuclear family unit as a kid for the millennial
Mm-hmm.
girl, which Rory certainly doesn't have.
No.
But it
No.
is like having that, I think, has really, I pitched my second book. When I pitched it, I was like, what if this postpartum lady thinks she's seeing the ghost of Margaret Wise Brown? And also there's a dissertation in this book, and also, you know, she has a psychotic break that might be ghosts. And like my agent was like, bring it, so like it
Yeah.
just was not, it felt very like everything I have brought to her, I feel like I've been like, can I do this? And she says, like, if you can do it, you can do it. And I think that's very rewarding.
And Julia, and this is the last thing I'll say on publishing specifically too, but I think that relationship is also the one I have with my agent
Hmm.
and editor. I have other editors who I think feel that way or would really pull for me. And I think it's more common than people let
Yeah.
themselves know.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think that if we're going to these external beliefs, right, I think it's so easy to get lost in the mizzen of the bad stuff, right? That like what we're here to do and the fact that there are many people who believe in what we're here to do can get
Yeah.
lost.
And
Yeah,
I also think that if you are like, I hate this, like what's meant for you won't pass you by kind of thing. But I really do think if you are
I
doing
think it is
good
true.
work, it will come
Yes,
around. Like I've seen
yes,
people too go out with a book and not sell it and then come back with a really like and have a really amazing experience with an editor or like a really big book deal or whatever it is. Like it isn't like
yeah.
the people who don't get it, it's not about to a certain extent it's luck, but like if you don't stop it will happen for you, I feel like is. And
I
so many
yeah.
people sort of let the first roadblock get in their way, which again it could be just that somebody had a bad day or it wasn't the right time
Yeah,
for this. And like if you continue to
totally.
do it, and it helps to have again, like I think that I'm sure there are some agents who are just out there to sort of continue to make bank, but I think the majority of literary agents who really care about the work are not in it for, how many big deals they can sell. They're in it to really be a part of making somebody's career and sort of be a part of that
Yeah.
process. And I think that will, if you have that person, like I think one, you can find that person if you continue to keep looking. And
Hmm.
two, like once you have that person, it becomes much more of a long big picture thing and less of a like, what have you done for me lately? Which I've had editorial experiences that feel very, what have you done for me lately? It hasn't been with my individual editors necessarily, but like I've had those
Yeah.
experiences in publishing. But when you find somebody who like the goal is to build a piece of art, um, that's, it's possible regardless of what markets are doing or what. I mean, the whole American economy is a total disaster anyway. Why should publishing be any different? But like the good parts are still there. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think like this is our the all the threads of our conversation, I think, are really tied together in an interesting way with the your pet name, right? And like becoming Margaux Eliot.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm really interested, I'm interested, right? I understand there are practical reasons, different
hmm
imprint, this
hmm
and that. And I'm wondering, right? Like allowing yourself to be a little playful with this, are there like did you feel like there were some sort of like freedoms or differences or like something new or expansive that like becoming Margaux allowed you to do? And I know you are your kiddo. Yes,
All right,
you
all
should think
resolved.
no
I
worries.
had two
Yeah.
separate people to get my kid, and one was like, he's gone. He's with the other one.
Okay, good.
Anyway,
I'm
no,
glad he's okay.
the pen name, Margaux Eliot, actually very relevant to
Yes.
my kids because my kids' names are Margot and Elliot, but spelled differently. And
Ah,
that is how we landed
cute.
on the pen name.
I love
Um,
that.
but yeah, the pen name story, it's interesting because I started writing this book partly as a like palette cleanser for the book
Mm,
that I had previously published, which like you said is like very Baroque, involved very heavy historical research,
mhm.
musicology research. Like it was a very research heavy, very dense, wonderful experience. But I sort of was like, I want the next project to feel different. And so when I
Mhm.
started working on a book that I had initially pitched as like Great Gatsby Newlyweds,
Mm.
on TV to, my agent, like I I wanted to go in a different direction and I wanted the narrator to be just like it's first person, the last one was third person, the language is cleaner, it's simpler, it takes place in the early 2000s and so it sounds like it takes place in the early 2000s as opposed to the other book,
Yeah.
which is not, in Italian, but it is like I was really interested in leaning into the Baroque elements of that book. Um and when I sent my agent the first like 75 or so pages, we were just like on the phone talking about it. And she said something, she's like, you might want to consider releasing this one under a pen name. And I initially
Mm.
was like, sure, yeah, okay. Like no, I had no
Mhm.
intention of doing that. But then as we got into sort of the editorial process with it, like once I had a draft and then had to figure out what kind of book it was, I found that what this book needed just as an early aughts sort of rom-com thriller rom-com. I don't know how you want to classify it, but like it needed something different from me than some of my previous work. And I was sort of bogging myself down trying to make sure I had all of the elements of like a Julia Fine novel. And this book never had anything speculative in it. My initial pitch for it was that it was going to be some sort of like sci-fi speculative, like who's the real reality TV. I don't know, but it never really went that way. And so then when I was looking at like how do I make it more compact, how do I make the book sort of fit together? Like I sort of see once I have a draft, and it's like a strong draft, I see so much of it as like pulling that sort of drawstring and like cinching it together. Um, and I needed to include elements that did not feel like the kind of thing I would have done in a past book. Like I wanted to have a
Mm.
happy ending instead of a tragedy, which everything else has
Mhm.
been, somewhat in the range. And I needed to have like things that I thought were maybe corny actually needed to be in this book. And I needed the
Yeah.
romance to feel more like a genre romance. And I needed sort of some of the drama to be more melodramatic in the vein of reality TV. And I felt like once I said, okay, yeah, let's do the pen name, I was able to make those editorial choices in a way that I just had not been able to, even though I knew the book needed it. I feel like I just like couldn't let myself when I thought about attaching it to my name, which I think probably is much more of an ego thing than it needed to be. But as soon as we were like, okay, this is this type of book, this is what this, I could make some of these probably more commercial leaning choices. And like, I did not have to be writing this like edgy, you know, I don't know what I thought I was like doing, but I could take out a lot of the stuff that just very clearly wasn't working in favor of stuff that would, and I could do that because I had sort of opened that door for myself.
That's cool. That's and I love it. It's almost like, I was I was reading an essay by a writer whose work I enjoy, a satirist, and she was talking about making like or it was making content in her case. It was like TikTok videos and stuff,
Mhm.
but that was auto fan fiction, right? Just kind of like it was, yeah, it was really
Uh-huh.
cool. She was sort of like riffing on stuff she'd written, and it was a really funny, interesting way. But this, it feels like this is almost like a species of that, right? In that, not like, oh, it's fan fiction about another book you've written, but
Mhm.
it's kind of like a an expansion of your universe
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
really cool, kind of cool way that acknowledges that there's a pre-existing space that is being sort of stepped out of, right? Or annexed. There's an annex
Mhm.
being built, right? Where there's a new place that you can kind of let your mind roam. You're still you, but you're doing
Yeah.
some different kind of stuff, and that's cool.
Mhm.
I love that. Well, Julia, thank you so much for coming on. I only have one more question for you before we wrap it all up. You've kind of previewed this, actually, by the way. Give all of my, I'm sorry, my brain is still like, ooh. Give all of my author guests the opportunity to kind of choose between. Do you want to give, 'cause a lot of younger writers watch this, you want to give younger writers some words of advice? You want to talk about a project you're currently working on, A or B? But you did tease a project that sounds really fascinating, so I
Oh.
might pigeonhole you here. Do you feel good about sharing with, like,
Who knows if it will go anywhere because this is again one of those like wacky things where I was in New York a few weeks ago and it took me half an hour to explain it to my agent who was like, "Okay, I guess my job is to figure out the book." I'm currently working on a book about con artist witch sisters who are
God.
scamming a billionaire family who like billionaire private equity family. So it's like practical magic meets like Succession meets sort of like Sirens, that
They're
Netflix
fully witches.
miniseries.
They're practical magic.
They're fully, yeah,
Oh.
there's full, they're finally actual witches. I feel like I've like alluded to witches a lot. It
Yeah.
actually started, I'm really interested in, and this is good. I mean, again, this is going to take us all day. So I was very interested in the Fox sisters, who were like the teenage girls who invented spiritualism in like the mid 1800s, like sort of
Mm.
during and immediately post Civil War. They like pranked their mom into thinking they could talk to dead people, and so everybody created a new religion around them anyway. But I'm interested in them and this relationship they had with their older
Mm.
sister, who sort of like stage mommed them. Um, and so my initial thought
Wow.
was that I would write something that was set um, in like the Gilded Age, like sort of the golden age of spiritualist con artists. But it wasn't really working. And so somebody suggested, like, why don't you make it contemporary? And I was like, oh, we are living in another Gilded Age. This is perfect. So it's
Wow.
very, very messy right now and like trying to sort of iron things through. But there are
Yeah.
sort of like elements of there's all sorts of weird, like sort of the other thing I'm pulling sort of from is like the witches from Macbeth are sort of an
Hmm.
inspiration.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's a lot of different stuff. It's very firmly a Julia Fine, not a Margaux Eliot book, like very, very clearly. Um, but I'm having a lot of fun with it, which again is like all you can really ask, regardless of whether it makes sense in the end.
Oh, that's so exciting. I love it when the scammers are also like actually the witches, like the begonia thing where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, turns out they were right, the conspiracy theorist was right. It's really
Yep.
cool. Yeah.
But it was just
So
in a different way than what the conspiracy
yeah,
theorists
it's
thought.
exactly right.
Exactly.
It
Yep.
wasn't,
Yep.
yeah.
They are conning
Um
you, but also, yeah.
but also like know
Mhm.
that magic is real. Yeah, it's that's really cool. Well, I'm excited to see that out in the real world. This is currently out in the real world. Honeymoon Stage by Margaux Eliot. Julia Fine, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank you so much for
show.
having me. This has been super fun. And thank you for like negotiating or navigating my logistical childcare
Oh,
I
Yeah, no.
appreciate
Oh
that.
gosh, zero worries. When parents come on the show, they get a full pass. They get you
Oh my
guys.
gosh, the week
Don't.
too.
It's
Apparently,
fine.
the week before, like the break, the holiday break, winter break starts, but like it really starts like 2 or 3 weeks before when all of the activities start to shift around and there's things you need to do. It's just like, this is,
It's
can we
it's
just,
crazy for the working writer mother. You need a
it's,
momager. I'm gonna pause the
honey, I know
recording now,
I
but you
should
need a
hire Chris.
momager.